The fog was so dense it felt like driving through milk. Jacob leaned forward, squinting over the steering wheel, as if that might help him see past the veil that had swallowed the road. His wife, Amanda, sat beside him with her hands gripping the dashboard, her knuckles bone white. In the back seat, their teenage daughter Lily had earbuds in, watching something on her phone, oblivious to the tension that hung inside the car like static. They'd left their home in Knoxville that morning, planning to reach a small lakeside Airbnb in northern Georgia before nightfall. It was meant to be a quiet weekend away. No work, no distractions, no phone calls. Just the three of them, a fire pit, and the sound of the woods at night. But the fog had rolled in hours earlier than forecasted, and the GPS had started acting strange about 20 miles back. It rerouted twice, then lost signal completely. "We should have stayed on the main highway," Amanda murmured, watching the shadowy trees loom closer. "This doesn't even look like a real road anymore." Jacob sighed, rubbing his jaw. "I'm trying to get us back to it. The GPS said to take County Road 19, and I haven't seen another sign since." "It's been 20 minutes since we saw a sign at all," Amanda snapped quietly, her voice tight. "Turn around before we end up lost in the woods." Jacob opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. He couldn't see any safe place to turn around. The road had narrowed, the asphalt cracking into jagged lines, branches stretching overhead like claws. There was something unsettling about how silent it all was. The car's tires made hardly any sound, and even the usual chirping of night insects seemed absent. He turned the radio dial, hoping for static at least, but every station was just dead air. "Lily," he said finally, glancing into the rearview mirror. "You getting any service?" She pulled out an earbud, frowning. "Nope, it went out like 20 minutes ago. I tried to text Ellie, and it just spun forever." Amanda shot Jacob a look that said, "I told you so." He gripped the wheel tighter and drove on, his headlights cutting a narrow, weak beam through the fog. After another few minutes, something appeared ahead, a faded wooden sign leaning to one side. Jacob slowed and rolled closer until the words became legible through the grime and moss. "Old Hollow Road," Amanda read aloud. "Why does that sound like every horror movie ever?" Jacob tried to laugh, but it came out thin. Probably just the name of some little back road. Once we find another junction, we'll get back on the main highway. He turned left onto Old Hollow Road. The asphalt turned to gravel within 100 feet. The trees pressed even closer now, their trunks slick with moisture. Fog wound between them in ghostly tendrils. The car bumped along slowly, and Lily finally looked up from her phone. "Dad, are you sure this is safe? It doesn't look like anyone's been down here in years." "I know," he admitted. "I'm just hoping this leads somewhere. Maybe a town." But there was no town. No light. No sound except for the low growl of the engine. After another mile, they came across an old bridge spanning what looked like a dried-up creek bed. The wood groaned as the tires rolled over it, echoing under the car. Amanda's breath hitched when a plank popped loudly beneath them. "Jacob, don't." They made it across, but the car jolted as if something heavy had dropped on the back bumper. Jacob slammed the brakes and twisted around, heart pounding. The red glow of the taillights illuminated only the swirling fog and the bare silhouettes of trees. Nothing moved. "What was that?" Amanda whispered. "Probably just a branch," he said automatically, though the words didn't sound convincing even to himself. He got out, the cold air instantly clinging to his skin. The smell of wet earth filled his lungs. The woods were eerily still. He walked around the car with his phone flashlight shaking slightly in his hand. The beam revealed nothing. No branch, no fallen debris. But when he reached the back bumper, he saw deep scratches carved into the paint, like something with claws had raked across it. He froze, staring, trying to make sense of it. The marks were fresh, edges sharp, tiny flakes of red paint hanging loose. Amanda rolled down her window. "Jacob, what is it?" He forced himself to straighten. "Nothing, just rocks from the bridge. Let's keep going." He got back inside, wiped his wet hands on his jeans, and pressed the gas. But now, every mile deeper felt heavier, the road twisting unnaturally as if it were guiding them somewhere rather than leading out. They passed a mailbox leaning crookedly, its paint eaten away by rust. The name was barely visible under a crust of dirt. M. Crowder. Lily frowned. "That sounds familiar. Probably from school reading or something," Amanda said quietly, eyes darting from side to side. Keep your window rolled up, honey. Just past the mailbox was a dirt driveway leading into the trees. An old farmhouse sat maybe 100 yards off the road, its roof caved in, porch sagging, a single window faintly reflecting the car's headlights. Jacob slowed, not sure why. Something about the house drew him in. The fog seemed thinner there, like the place was holding it back. But the air felt heavier. "Don't stop," Amanda said firmly. "Please, don't stop." "I'm not," he said, pressing the gas. But as they passed, Lily swore she saw someone standing in the window. A figure, just a dark outline, still and silent. She blinked, and it was gone. "Mom," she whispered, "someone's in that house." Amanda turned instantly, staring through the fog. "There's no one there." "I saw them." "You didn't," Jacob said quickly. "It's the fog playing tricks." But as they drove away, Amanda couldn't shake the chill creeping up her spine. She glanced at the side mirror, and her breath caught. For the briefest second, the figure was in the road behind them, a tall shadow just standing there in the red wash of the taillights, watching them leave. By the time she blinked, it was gone. Her hands trembled. She didn't tell Jacob. He was already gripping the wheel too tightly, his jaw set in stone. But she knew what she'd seen, and she'd seen it watching them. They drove on for another half hour, though the clock on the dashboard seemed to be stuck at 10:14. Jacob tapped the face of it, confused. "Did the time freeze?" "Battery's probably off," Amanda said, her voice thin. "Can we please just stop somewhere safe? There's nowhere safe out here." Then suddenly lights appeared ahead, 2 flickering bulbs on either side of an old sign. As they approached, they could read the faded paint. Misty Creek Diner. Jacob exhaled in relief. Finally, civilization. The diner looked like it had been abandoned decades ago. The parking lot was cracked, weeds pushing through the asphalt, but the lights were on. One neon tube above the door buzzed faintly, casting an eerie blue glow on the fog. Lily frowned. "Why is it open? Who would even come here?" Amanda didn't answer. They parked near the entrance. Inside, through the dusty windows, they could see movement, shadows shifting. Jacob told them to wait in the car, but Amanda grabbed his arm. "No, we stay together." He nodded. They stepped out into the cold, damp air. The gravel crunched under their feet as they approached the diner. The closer they got, the more wrong it felt. The light inside flickered too slowly, the hum of electricity dragging unnaturally long between pulses. Jacob pushed open the door. A small bell jingled, flat and dull. The air smelled of grease and mildew. "Hello," he called. No one answered. The place looked frozen in time. Half-eaten meals still sat on tables, cups turned over, chairs pulled out like someone had left in a hurry. The jukebox in the corner clicked faintly, as if it were trying to play but couldn't quite start. Lily touched one of the plates. "This food is cold, like really old." Amanda ran her hand across the counter. Her fingers came away coated in dust. Jacob frowned. "Then where's that light coming from?" The lights flickered again, and for a split second every table was full. Dozens of people sat frozen mid-bite, their faces pale and blurred, eyes unfocused. The sound of silverware clinking echoed faintly. Then the lights steadied, and they were gone. Empty tables, silent air. Amanda let out a small scream. "Jacob! I saw it!" he whispered, his voice shaking. "Let's go." They rushed back outside, but something had changed. The fog had thickened, and the car's outline was barely visible. Jacob hit the key fob. The headlights blinked faintly through the white haze. They got in, slammed the doors, and locked them. "Dad," Lily whispered. Through the windshield, the fog parted just enough to reveal the figure again, standing in the road closer now. It wasn't clear if it was a man or a woman. Its proportions seemed wrong, like someone had stretched the limbs too long. Its head tilted unnaturally to one side. No eyes, no features, just a hollow blur of darkness. Jacob floored the gas. The tires spun on the wet gravel, then caught. The car shot forward, headlights slicing through the fog. But no matter how fast they drove, the figure never seemed to get smaller in the rear view. It was always there, sometimes ahead, sometimes to the side, sometimes reflected faintly in the glass, even when there was nothing outside. Amanda covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Jacob, please, please stop." "I can't stop," he yelled. "We just have to get out of here." The road wound endlessly through the woods, every turn looking the same. They passed the same rusted mailbox again. M. Crowder. Amanda sobbed. "We're going in circles." "No, that's impossible," Jacob said, but his voice broke. Lily pressed her face to the window, trying to see anything familiar. That's when she noticed the shapes between the trees, figures, dozens of them, all standing motionless. Some near, some far, all turned toward the road, toward the car, watching. Their clothes looked old, faded flannel, torn dresses, muddy boots. Their faces were pale and blank. Every time the headlights swept over them, they disappeared, only to reappear in the next stretch of woods. Mom, Lily's voice cracked. They're following us. Jacob didn't answer. His hands shook violently on the wheel. The car hit a pothole hard, jolting them. When he looked up again, the road had split into two directions, left and right. No signs. No markers. Which way? Amanda cried. Right, Lily said suddenly. I don't know why, but right. He turned right. The tires screeched. For a moment, the fog thinned and they saw the lights of a gas station ahead. It looked almost new, bright and clean, with a modern sign flickering faintly, Miller's Gas and Food Mart. They didn't hesitate. Jacob pulled in fast and parked. The lights hummed warmly above, and for the first time in hours, they could hear something normal, the faint music from inside, the buzz of electricity. A man stood behind the counter, wiping his hands with a towel. Jacob rushed in. Thank God. We've been lost for hours. There's something wrong out there. The man blinked slowly like he hadn't heard. His face was expressionless. Long way from home? Yes, Knoxville. We took a wrong turn off the highway and... Old Hollow Road, the man interrupted, voice flat. Jacob froze. How did you know that? The man didn't answer. He just kept wiping the same spot on the counter, his eyes glazed. Behind him, shelves were empty. No drinks, no chips. Nothing. Amanda tugged on Jacob's arm. Let's go, please. The man finally looked up at her. You shouldn't have come this way. Nobody does. Not twice. The lights flickered. For a heartbeat, his face wasn't a face anymore. It was hollow, the skin sagging like wax, eyes gone. Then it snapped back. Amanda screamed and dragged Jacob toward the door. But when they got outside, the gas station was gone. The car was gone. They were standing in the middle of the road again, surrounded by fog. Lily wasn't with them. Amanda spun, screaming her name. Her voice echoed through the trees, but there was no answer. Jacob ran into the woods, calling, his flashlight beam slicing through the mist. Lily, he yelled. Lily! The fog swallowed his voice. He could barely see Amanda now, just her outline near the road, trembling. Then he heard it, a soft sobbing. He turned, heart pounding. The light landed on a figure kneeling beside a tree. Lily? He whispered, rushing forward. But it wasn't her. It was something else, something wearing her jacket. Its head lifted slowly, and its face, his knees buckled. It looked like Lily's face stretched over something else. The mouth too wide, the eyes empty sockets leaking black tears. Daddy, it whispered in her voice. Why did you leave me? He stumbled backward, tripping over roots. The thing stood, jerking unnaturally, and began walking toward him. He turned and ran. He could hear it behind him, wet footsteps, the sound of snapping twigs, the faint echo of his daughter's voice calling his name, closer and closer until a blinding light washed over him. He collapsed onto asphalt. A truck horn blared. When he looked up, he was lying on the shoulder of a wide, modern highway. Cars roared past. The fog was gone. Amanda was beside him, sort of unconscious but breathing. No sign of Lily. Paramedics came, flashing lights, voices shouting. He kept asking them where his daughter was. They said there was no one else, just two adults found near Old Hollow Road. Weeks later, Jacob went back. The police told him there was no Old Hollow Road in that area anymore. It had been sealed off years ago after a landslide. No record of a diner, no gas station, no farmhouse, nothing, just woods. But he still drives out there sometimes, late at night, hoping for fog, hoping for a sign. Sometimes he swears he hears her voice in the distance, whispering from the trees. Daddy, take the right turn this time. Story the end. The rain had been coming down in steady sheets for hours, the kind of relentless drizzle that soaked into the bones and made the road shine like glass beneath the headlights. Caleb tightened his grip on the steering wheel, squinting through the wipers that struggled to keep up. His GPS signal had cut out 15 minutes ago, and all he could see ahead was the stretch of rural highway lined with pine trees that reached high into the dark sky. The storm had chased away any hint of moonlight. He was on his way to visit his girlfriend, Mara, who had just moved to a small college town in West Virginia. What was supposed to be a 6-hour drive had turned into nearly 8. thanks to a wrong exit and road construction that forced him onto unfamiliar back roads. He'd thought he could cut through by taking a smaller route, but now the landscape seemed to twist into itself, and every curve looked exactly like the one before it. The green highway signs had grown less frequent, then disappeared altogether. No other cars had passed him in over an hour. Even the radio was dead, just static between every channel. He tried humming to himself, anything to fill the silence, but even his own voice sounded strange, muffled by the downpour hammering against the roof. His gas gauge was slipping toward empty. The last station he'd seen was miles back, and he hadn't stopped because he thought he'd hit a town soon. Now there was nothing. No lights, no houses, no sound, but the hiss of rain and the occasional squeal of his tires on slick pavement. Then, like a small miracle, he saw a sign up ahead through the rain. It was old and barely legible, but the reflective letters glowed faintly in the headlights. Miller's Hollow, 4 miles. Finally, he muttered, relief washing over him. A small town meant gas, maybe a diner somewhere dry to regroup. He took the turn when it came, a narrow 2-lane road that cut deeper into the trees. The asphalt changed to rougher pavement, cracked and patched, and his headlights caught glimpses of wooden fence posts and mist curling up from the ditch. As he drove, he started to notice how quiet it was. The trees seemed thicker here, their branches hanging low like they were trying to block the road. The wind didn't move them. There were no sounds of frogs or insects, just the hum of his engine. After a few minutes, he saw a small bridge ahead. The wood looked old, slick with rain, but sturdy enough. The second he drove over it, a jolt of static came through his speakers. Caleb frowned and turned the volume down, but even then, a faint whisper seemed to slip through, just a murmur, too low to make out. Then it was gone. He shook it off and pressed on. A few minutes later, he saw the glow of lights. Faded street lamps lined the road as he entered what he assumed was Miller's Hollow. The town looked like something from 50 years ago, tiny, with an old general store, a post office with peeling paint, and houses set far apart, but something about it felt off. The lights were on, but the windows were dark. There were no cars parked anywhere, no people walking on the sidewalks. Every building had that same dim glow spilling from the windows, but no movement behind them. Caleb slowed down, scanning for any sign of life. "Hello?" he said softly, though he knew no one could hear him from inside the car. The rain had eased to a drizzle now, enough that he could roll the window down slightly. The air smelled strange, like wet soil and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. It made him grimace. He rolled the window back up and kept driving. At the edge of town, he finally saw a gas station. The sign read, "Miller's Fuel and Service," and one of the fluorescent lights flickered. The place looked half abandoned, but the open sign buzzed faintly red in the window. He pulled up to a pump, shut off the engine, and climbed out into the wet air. The pump didn't look like it had been used in years. No credit card reader, no digital display, just the old-fashioned spinning numbers. He tried the handle, but it was locked. He looked toward the small station building. The inside was dim, but he thought he saw someone move near the counter. Caleb jogged up to the door and pushed it open. A small bell jingled overhead. "Hey, sorry, is the pump working? I'm running low on gas," he called out. The place smelled musty, like damp paper and oil. Rows of dusty snacks lined the shelves, and the refrigerator hummed faintly. Behind the counter, a man stood with his back turned, wearing a heavy work jacket. His shoulders were stiff. "Sir?" Caleb said again, stepping closer. The man turned slowly. His face was pale, his eyes sunken deep, and his lips looked almost gray. But he smiled faintly. "Pump's workin'," he said, his voice low and raspy. "Just needs cash. How much you need?" Caleb hesitated. Something about the man made his skin crawl. $20 worth." The man nodded and reached under the counter, producing an old key on a wire ring. "Pump number 2, he said, sliding it across the counter. "You'll need to unlock it first. Rain's been bad for the locks." Caleb took the key. "Thanks. You got any cell service around here?" "My GPS died." The man blinked slowly. "Ain't much service here. Miller's Hollow's off the map, son. Always has been." The way he said it made Caleb pause. "Right," he said quietly, forcing a polite smile. "Appreciate the help." When he went back outside, the air felt colder. He unlocked the pump and filled his tank quickly, glancing back at the station windows. The man was still standing there. watching him. Once the tank was full, Caleb climbed back into the car, ready to leave. He looked down at the dashboard. His phone had powered back on. No service, but at least it wasn't dead anymore. He switched to offline maps and tried to reorient himself. The map didn't show any town called Miller's Hollow, even though he'd just driven through it. Confused, he zoomed out on the map. Nothing, just a blank patch of green forest where he should have been. He started the engine and pulled out of the station, turning back the way he came. The town looked different now. The fog was thicker, rolling low along the road. The lights in the houses were still on, but they flickered, dimming one by one as he passed. His heart began to race. He pressed the gas pedal harder. When he reached the bridge again, he felt that same static hum through the speakers. The whispering returned, louder this time. He caught fragments of words. His name, maybe. Caleb, the voice murmured, right behind his ear. He swerved slightly, glancing in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. "Get it together," he muttered, gripping the wheel. "You're tired. Just tired." But when he crossed the bridge, something hit the roof of his car, a heavy, dull thud. He slammed on the brakes, heart hammering. He stared up through the windshield, rain pelting down. Nothing. Slowly, he stepped out of the car, flashlight in hand. The air was colder here, almost freezing. He shined the beam across the top of the car, just wet leaves. But the sound hadn't been leaves. It had been heavy, like a body. As he turned the flashlight toward the woods, he saw movement, just a flicker between the trees. A figure, tall and thin, standing at the edge of the forest. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. Caleb froze. His first instinct was to call out, but his voice caught in his throat. The beam of his flashlight trembled. The figure didn't step forward, it just tilted its head slightly, as if watching him. He backed toward the car, never taking his eyes off the thing. Then, when he blinked, it was gone. He got back in the car, locked the doors, and hit the gas. He didn't care if he wrecked. He just needed to get back to the main highway. But after driving for 10 minutes, he realized something was wrong. The road wasn't taking him back to the highway. It was taking him deeper into the woods. The asphalt had narrowed, branches scraping against the sides of his car. He checked his phone again. The map still showed a blank space, but now his GPS dot was spinning in circles. Then he saw headlights in the distance, coming toward him. He slowed, relieved at first to see another car. As it approached, though, his relief faded. It was an old pickup truck, its headlights dim and yellow. It swerved slightly as it came closer, and when it passed him, he glanced over. No driver. The cab was empty. His mouth went dry. He slammed on the brakes and looked in the rearview mirror. The truck was gone. No taillights, no sound. The rain started again, heavier than before. He could barely see 10 feet ahead. The road twisted sharply, and suddenly he was driving past an old sign that read Miller's Hollow, 4 miles. He hit the brakes, confusion giving way to panic. That was the same sign he'd seen an hour ago. Somehow he was looping back. No, 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 no. His voice cracked. He slammed the wheel, breathing fast. He turned the car around and drove in the opposite direction, ignoring how the trees seemed to close in on him. Minutes turned into an hour. The fuel gauge dipped again. The fog thickened until it swallowed the headlights. He had no idea where he was going. Eventually, he saw light through the mist again, soft, flickering light. He slowed down and realized it was the same gas station, the same broken sign. The man was still inside, standing at the counter, watching through the window. Caleb didn't stop. He floored it past the station, heart slamming in his chest. He didn't know how, but the road wasn't letting him leave. Every turn brought him back to the same places: the bridge, the sign, the gas station, the empty houses. Hours passed like that. His clock blinked 3:18 a.m., then 3:18 again. It didn't change. He started to feel lightheaded, his mind spinning from exhaustion. The whispers came back, soft at first, then louder, like they were coming from the woods, from the rain, from the engine itself. "Turn around," they said. "You took the wrong road." He slammed his palms against the wheel. "What do you want from me?" he shouted. The headlights flickered. For a second he thought he saw shapes in the mist ahead, figures standing in the road, watching him. They looked like people, but their faces were blank. He swerved off the road and the car slid into a ditch, mud splattering against the windows. The engine sputtered and died. He sat there, shaking, staring out at the fog. His phone was dead again. The air inside the car felt wrong, too still, like the world had stopped moving. Then, faintly, through the rain, he heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. He turned toward the sound, his pulse roaring in his ears. A figure emerged from the mist, someone wearing a dark coat, tall and thin, the same one from before. It stopped a few feet from his door and tilted its head again. Caleb's breath hitched. He tried to start the car, but the key turned uselessly in the ignition. He looked back up, and the figure was gone. Something brushed against the back window. He spun around. A pale hand pressed against the glass. Then another. And another. They came out of the fog, dozens of them, people, or what looked like people. Their faces were gray and blurred, their eyes hollow, their mouths open but silent. They surrounded the car, pressing against it from all sides. Caleb screamed and kicked open the door, stumbling out into the rain. He ran, slipping in the mud, crashing through the trees. The forest was endless, the fog so thick he could barely see his hands in front of him. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs gave out. He collapsed against a tree, gasping. Behind him, the whispers moved through the woods, circling, closing in. He covered his ears and squeezed his eyes shut, whispering, "Wake up, please wake up." When he opened his eyes again, it was daylight. He was lying on the side of a road. The rain had stopped. His car was gone. So was the fog. He stumbled to his feet, shivering, disoriented. A passing pickup truck slowed beside him, the window rolling down. A man in his 50s leaned out. "You okay, son? You look like hell." Caleb could barely speak. I got lost. There was a town, Miller's Hollow." The man frowned. "Ain't no town called that around here. Closest place is over 20 miles east." Caleb just stared at him, his throat dry. "No, I was just there. Gas station bridge." The man shook his head. "You're mixed up. This area's been empty since the 50s. Flood wiped out a settlement back then. Folks said it was cursed." Caleb froze. "Flood?" "Yeah," the man said. "They say the bridge collapsed while it took the whole town with it. Ain't nothing left but woods and swamp now." Caleb felt the blood drain from his face. He looked back down the road toward where he thought he'd come from. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, innocent and quiet. The man in the truck said, "You need a ride? Closest gas station's a ways out." Caleb nodded numbly and climbed into the truck. As they drove, he glanced back again, just once. Through the trees, far behind them, he thought he saw the faint outline of a bridge, and standing in the middle of it, a tall figure in a dark coat, watching. Story the end. The night had settled thick and low over the Blue Ridge Mountains, the kind of darkness that swallowed even the edges of the high beams. The road had narrowed into a single lane hours ago, winding deeper into the trees, and every turn looked the same, sharp, silent, suffocating. Ryan kept his hands tight on the steering wheel, leaning forward as if the closer he got to the windshield, the more control he'd have over the road. The GPS had frozen 10 minutes ago, leaving him with that mocking blue arrow spinning in circles. He didn't even have a bar of service to refresh it. "Man, this can't be right," said Tyler from the passenger seat, his voice low but carrying that edge of irritation that had been growing all night. "We should have hit the highway by now." Ryan glanced over. "You saw the sign. Route 34 cuts through to Asheville. This is it." "Yeah, but it feels like we're driving straight into a horror movie." From the back seat, Lisa gave a small laugh that didn't sound confident. "Then maybe we shouldn't joke about that right now." The laughter died as soon as it came. The only sound left was the tires on gravel and the hum of the engine. They'd left Knoxville after dinner, trying to take a shortcut across the mountains to make it to a rented cabin before midnight. It had seemed simple, until the paved road dissolved into dirt and the night got heavy with fog. "Should we turn around?" Lisa asked after a few minutes. Ryan thought about it. The problem was, he wasn't sure where they could even turn around anymore. The road was boxed in by trees so dense it looked like they were growing together overhead. He'd need to back up half a mile just to find enough space. "We'll hit something soon," he said, trying to sound sure. "A gas station, a light, something. Or a deer," Tyler muttered, looking out his window. "This is the kind of place that eats cars whole." No one laughed. The headlights caught something up ahead, a sign. The paint was faded, the lettering barely visible through the grime and rust, but Ryan slowed down anyway. The sign read, "Welcome to Coldwater Hollow." Lisa leaned forward between the seats. "That's not on the map." Maybe it's just a local community, Ryan said. Tiny town, probably just off the route. Tyler squinted. Coldwater Hollow. That doesn't sound like a place you find on purpose. But they drove on. The trees began to thin, and Ryan's relief lasted all of 30 seconds before the road opened into what looked like a forgotten town. The buildings were old, two-story brick structures, some with collapsed roofs, others boarded up. A gas station sat at the corner, its sign missing half the letters. The air felt heavier, colder, like the fog had settled into the bones of the place. See? Ryan said. Gas station. We're good. He pulled up beside the pump island. The overhead lights were dark. The glass door to the mini-mart cracked. When he stepped out of the car, his breath came out white. The air smelled like wet dirt and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. He walked to the door, tried the handle. It didn't budge. Tyler got out next, stretching and shivering. Creepy as hell, he said, kicking a loose piece of asphalt. It's like time forgot this place. Lisa stayed in the car, hugging her jacket. I don't like this. Let's just go back. I'll pay for another tank if we waste gas. Ryan turned in a slow circle. The wind moved through the trees like whispering voices. Every building he looked at had that same half-dead look, a feeling that no one had been there in years, but also that someone might be watching. There's got to be someone around, he said, a caretaker or... Tyler interrupted, pointing. Hey, over there. Across the road, a light flickered in a window. It came from a small building at the end of the street, maybe a house, maybe a store. It was hard to tell. The light glowed weakly through a yellowed curtain. Ryan hesitated, then started walking toward it. Tyler followed without a word. The gravel crunched under their shoes, and the sound seemed to echo too far. When they reached the porch, Ryan knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder. Hello? We're kind of lost out here. There was a pause, and then the curtain shifted. A shadow moved behind it, slow and cautious. Ryan froze. See that? Yeah, Tyler whispered. The door creaked open an inch, revealing a single bloodshot eye behind the crack. Who's there? The voice rasped. It was an old man's voice, low and thin, like it hadn't been used in a while. Sorry to bother you, Ryan said quickly. We're trying to get back to the highway. GPS took us off course, just wondering how far we are from Route 34. The man stared for a long time, like he was trying to decide if they were real. Finally, he said, Ain't no highway through here. Ryan blinked. What do you mean? The map said, There ain't no highway through Coldwater Hollow, the man said again, voice flat. Not for a long time. The door started to close, but Ryan stepped forward. Wait, could you just tell us how to get back? The man hesitated, then said, You best leave before dark. It's already dark, Tyler said. The man's eye twitched, and for a second, Ryan thought he saw genuine fear flicker across his face. Then you best leave now, the man said, and slammed the door shut. Tyler stared at it. The hell was that? Ryan backed away slowly. Let's just go. We'll find another road. When they got back to the car, Lisa was gripping the steering wheel even though she wasn't driving. What did he say? Nothing useful, Ryan muttered. Just said we should leave. Lisa's voice trembled. Then let's listen to him. Ryan didn't argue. He started the engine, turned the car around, and headed back the way they'd come, except it wasn't the same way. The road twisted differently now, sharper turns, steeper hills. The fog had thickened again, and the trees seemed to have moved closer to the edges of the road. Wait, Tyler said, staring out the window. Didn't we pass that sign already? The same rusted road sign, Welcome to Coldwater Hollow, appeared again out of the fog. Ryan's chest tightened. That's impossible. We just turned around. Lisa's voice broke. Ryan, what's happening? He didn't answer. He drove faster, trying to shake off the feeling that the road itself was changing beneath the tires. Every turn looked familiar, yet slightly wrong, like the world was folding back on itself. They passed the sign again and again and again. Tyler hit the dashboard. We're in a loop, man. We're in a goddamn loop. Shut up, Ryan snapped, gripping the wheel, but he couldn't deny it. The headlights cut through the same fog, illuminated the same cracked sign, and brought them back to the same empty town square. This time, the gas station lights were on. Lisa covered her mouth. Ryan, you see that? The yellow lights buzzed faintly over the pumps now, though the store still looked abandoned. Tyler muttered, No way, that wasn't on before. Ryan parked, his heart pounding in his ears. Maybe someone's there now. He stepped out again, the cold air biting his skin. The buzzing light flickered above him. As he approached the door, it swung open on its own. Inside, the shelves were mostly empty, covered in dust, but the air was warm. Too warm. He could hear faint static like a radio between stations. A single fluorescent bulb blinked overhead. "Hello?" he called. The static shifted. Words slipped through, soft and broken. "Don't stay." Ryan froze. "What?" Then the lights went out. Tyler swore and stumbled back outside, dragging Ryan with him. From the dark inside the store came a slow, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. Ryan's throat closed. He grabbed the car door. "Get in, now." They peeled out of the parking lot, the tires spitting gravel. The rearview mirror caught movement in the fog, something stepping into the road behind them, something pale, thin, and wrong. Lisa started crying quietly, hands over her face. "What was that?" Tyler said, voice breaking. Ryan didn't look back. He just drove. But the fog thickened again. The road disappeared under it, and then, just like that, they hit something. The car jolted hard, skidding sideways before stopping. "Jesus Christ!" Ryan yelled, slamming the brakes. They all sat frozen for a moment, the sound of the engine idling loud in the silence. Tyler was the first to speak. "What did we hit?" Ryan swallowed, got out of the car, and walked around the front. The bumper was dented down, smeared with something dark, but there was nothing on the road. No body, no animal, nothing, just fog. He turned in a slow circle, breathing hard. There's nothing here. Then he heard it, the same dragging sound, somewhere behind the trees. "Get back in the car," Lisa whispered from the open window. Ryan obeyed. He floored it. The road ahead curved sharply, and as they rounded it, they saw the lights again. The same gas station, the same dead town sign. They hadn't gone anywhere. Tyler started to lose it, hitting the window with his fist. "We can't get out! We can't get out!" Ryan was shaking now. "I don't understand. I don't." Then the car died. The lights went out, the engine went silent. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The fog pressed against the glass like a living thing. Then from somewhere outside came a faint knock on the driver's window. Ryan turned his head slowly. Something stood just outside, its face pressed close to the glass. Its skin looked wet, its eyes wide and colorless, its mouth slightly open like it was whispering. But there was no sound. Ryan screamed and threw the car into gear, but it didn't move. The thing tilted its head. Then it smiled. Every window in the car shattered at once. Lisa screamed. Tyler scrambled for the door. Ryan slammed on the gas. The car lurched forward again, this time tearing down the road faster than it ever had. The fog swirled violently around them, shapes flickering inside it, faces, arms, silhouettes, stretching toward the car as they passed. "Please," Lisa cried, "please get us out." And then, suddenly, the fog broke. The road widened. Asphalt returned under the tires. Streetlights appeared. They were out. Ryan slowed down, gasping, shaking so badly he could barely keep the car straight. Behind them, the fog wall sat perfectly still, like a curtain. No one spoke for miles. By the time they reached a small diner off the main highway, the clock read 3:12 a.m. They stumbled inside, pale and trembling. A woman behind the counter frowned. "You folks all right?" Ryan nodded weakly. "We just got lost. Up near Coldwater Hollow." The woman's face went blank. She set down the coffee pot slowly. "Coldwater Hollow?" she repeated. "Yeah," Tyler said. "That's the sign we saw. We were stuck there. Roads kept looping." The woman shook her head. "There ain't no Coldwater Hollow anymore. That town was flooded 30 years ago, drowned out when they built the reservoir." Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. No, we were there." The woman stared at them, eyes narrowing with unease. "Then you must have taken a wrong turn," she said softly, "because whatever's up there now, it ain't Coldwater Hollow anymore." Outside, the fog was creeping down the road again, slowly swallowing the lights. Story the end. It was close to midnight when Trevor realized he had taken the wrong turn. The GPS on his dashboard flickered uncertainly, recalculating every few seconds as if it couldn't decide which way was right. The screen glowed faintly blue in the dark car, illuminating his tired eyes and the sweat on his forehead. He'd been driving for nearly 9 hours, an impulsive trip from Chicago to visit his sister in rural West Virginia. She'd called him earlier that week, crying about her divorce, and he couldn't just ignore it. But now, after missing an exit somewhere along I-64, he was in the middle of nowhere. The interstate had gradually narrowed into a two-lane road and then into something smaller, more forgotten. Trees leaned in from both sides, their branches scraping the roof every now and then like thin fingers testing the metal. His cell phone signal had died half an hour ago, and even the GPS's calm, robotic voice seemed to be losing confidence in itself. He slowed down, squinting through the windshield. There weren't any streetlights, no signs, no houses, nothing but the occasional stretch of fog drifting low over the cracked asphalt. The air inside the car was heavy and still, the only sound the steady hum of the engine and the rhythmic creak of the suspension over the uneven road. Trevor had always been good with directions. He prided himself on it. But tonight, the world felt wrong. The road didn't seem to lead anywhere. Every turn looked the same, long stretches of dark forest, then a bend, then another, the same gnarled trees leaning over him like a canopy. It was like driving through a loop that refused to end. He caught sight of a sign up ahead. Finally, something human-made. He slowed down and rolled closer, the headlights washing over it. The metal was rusted and bent, the words barely legible beneath streaks of grime and moss. It read, Hollow Creek, 7 miles. He didn't remember seeing that name on the map earlier, but he figured it was better than driving blind. He turned in that direction, hoping to find a gas station, a diner, something. The road grew narrower still, the trees pressing closer until it felt like he was driving through a tunnel of black wood. The moonlight barely reached the ground. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out, followed by the faint rustle of something moving through the brush. His headlights caught the glimmer of a stream running alongside the road. The water looked oddly dark, almost oily, and it reflected the trees in a distorted shimmer. Trevor shivered. He tried turning on the radio just for the company of noise, but all he got was static. A few more minutes of driving brought him to what looked like a crossroads, though crossroads was generous. One road led straight ahead into deeper forest. Another cut sharply left toward a faded wooden bridge. A signpost stood at the junction, its arm pointing toward the bridge. Hollow Creek. The bridge looked old, its planks warped and its guardrails eaten away by rust. The creek below was nearly invisible in the darkness, but he could hear it trickling faintly beneath. He hesitated for a moment, then eased forward, tires thumping over the boards. Each one groaned under the car's weight. Halfway across, the radio hissed to life on its own. Static filled the cabin, sharp and loud. Then a voice broke through, faint, distant, like someone whispering just beyond his ear. Turn back. Trevor froze, his hand hovering over the dial. The voice was gone just as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the soft fuzz of static again. He switched the radio off, telling himself it was just interference. Maybe he'd passed some kind of old power line. When he made it to the other side, the road sloped gently upward. The trees began to thin, revealing open fields dotted with the occasional fence post. It should have felt like a relief, but something about the openness made it worse. The fields were dead. No crops, no grass, just brittle stalks and dry earth stretching into the fog. Then he saw the town. Hollow Creek wasn't much of a town at all. A cluster of buildings huddled together near what might have once been a main street. The few streetlights that still stood flickered weakly, their orange glow barely cutting through the mist. The storefronts were boarded up, windows broken or covered in grime. Trevor slowed to a crawl, looking around. There was a gas station on the corner, though it looked long abandoned. The sign out front read, "Open 24 hours," but all the lights were dead. He parked the car in front of it, cutting the engine. The silence that followed was suffocating. He could hear the creak of metal in the wind, a loose sign swinging somewhere. When he stepped out, his boots crunched on broken glass. The air smelled faintly of rust and something sweetly rotten, like fruit left out too long. He called out, "Hello?" But his voice just bounced off the buildings and came back to him, hollow and thin. He tried the gas pump, more out of habit than hope. The handle was stiff and cold, and when he lifted it, a faint trickle of something dark leaked out. It wasn't gas. It looked more like oil, thick and tar-like. He dropped the handle immediately. A shape moved in the corner of his vision. He spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing there, just fog swirling between the old buildings. "Hello?" He called again. Still nothing. He started walking down the main street, flashlight in hand now. His footsteps echoed off the empty storefronts. Every building seemed to have been abandoned for decades, paint peeled in long strips and doors hung loose on rusted hinges. But the strange thing was that everything looked as if it had been left in a hurry. A diner had plates still set on tables, half-filled salt shakers, a chair knocked over. The glass door bore a closed sign that looked freshly hung, though the inside was thick with dust. Trevor pushed the door open, the bell above it giving a dull, strained ring. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the smell of mildew. He swept his flashlight across the booths. There were napkin dispensers, coffee mugs, even an old newspaper lying open on the counter. He stepped closer. The paper's date was August 14th, 1992. The ink had run slightly from water damage, but the headline was still visible. Local family missing after bridge collapse. Hollow Creek under investigation. Trevor frowned. The bridge he'd just crossed hadn't looked new, but it hadn't looked like it had collapsed either. Maybe they rebuilt it after that. He turned toward the back of the diner, and that's when he heard it. Faint, dragging footsteps on the tiled floor behind him. He spun around, shining the flashlight toward the sound, but the diner was empty. His pulse hammered in his chest. The sound had been close. Too close. He was sure he'd heard it. "Hello?" he said again, his voice trembling slightly. The silence returned. He started backing toward the door, his flashlight flicking nervously from one shadow to another. As he reached for the handle, the jukebox in the corner suddenly came to life. It crackled, then began to play some old song, faint, warped, the voice of the singer stretching and slowing like a record spinning down. Trevor bolted. He yanked the door open and stumbled into the street, the music following him until the door swung shut behind him. He ran back to his car and jumped inside, slamming the lock down with shaking hands. The engine sputtered when he turned the key, then caught with a weak rumble. The headlights cut through the fog, and for a moment he thought he saw someone standing at the far end of the street. A figure, tall and thin, facing him. But when he blinked, it was gone. He pressed the accelerator and turned the car around, heading back toward the bridge. He just wanted to get out, find the main road again, get as far from this place as possible. But when he reached the spot where the bridge had been, his heart froze. It wasn't there. The creek still ran below, but the bridge itself was gone. Nothing but broken planks jutting out from the edges, the rest swallowed by the dark water. Trevor stared in disbelief. That wasn't possible. He'd just crossed it less than half an hour ago. There was no sign of collapse, no damage. Now it looked ancient, like it had rotted away years ago. He stepped out of the car again, shining his flashlight toward the creek. The beam caught on something floating in the water, a piece of wood maybe, but then it shifted and he realized it wasn't wood at all. It was a face, pale, bloated, eyes open wide and staring straight at him. He stumbled backward, tripping over a rock. The flashlight dropped from his hand and rolled into the grass, the beam spinning wildly before it landed on something else, a child's shoe, half buried in mud. Trevor ran back to the car, heart pounding so hard it hurt. He slammed the door shut and jammed the gear shift into reverse. But the tires spun uselessly. The car wasn't moving. He looked down. Mud. The wheels had sunk into it. He tried again, flooring the accelerator, but the car only groaned and slid deeper. The headlights flickered, then dimmed. Then he heard it again. Footsteps. Soft, squelching, moving closer from behind the car. Trevor froze. The sound stopped, then resumed, slower this time, deliberate. Someone, or something, was walking up the road toward him. He didn't turn around. He couldn't. He just stared at the windshield, his breath fogging the glass. Then slowly, something moved into view. A shadow passing across the beams of his headlights. A human shape. He could barely make out the details, but he saw enough. Long hair dripping wet, clothes clinging to a thin body, the way it tilted its head slightly, as if curious. Then it smiled. The headlights flickered once more, and the figure was gone. Trevor screamed and tried the ignition again. The car stuttered, then roared to life. But when he looked up, the road ahead wasn't empty anymore. There were people standing there, dozens of them, men, women, children, all soaked, their skin pale and swollen, eyes dark and hollow. They stood in the road silently facing the car. The headlights made their skin glisten. Some of them were missing limbs. Others looked like they'd been burned. Trevor's mind blanked. He slammed the car into drive and hit the gas. jerking the wheel to the right to avoid hitting them. The tires finally caught enough traction to lurch forward, and the car veered off the road, crashing through the underbrush. Branches scraped the sides, leaves whipping against the windshield. He didn't care where he was going anymore, just away. He kept driving until the road disappeared completely, the forest closing in. When he finally stopped, his chest heaved. The forest was silent again, too silent. He sat there for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to slow his breathing. Then his phone buzzed. He nearly jumped out of his skin. The screen lit up, showing 1 bar of service. A single notification, missed call unknown. Before he could react, the phone rang again. Same number. He hesitated, then answered. Static filled the line, then a voice, soft, wet, distorted. You shouldn't have come here. He dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, still hissing faintly. When he leaned down to grab it, he froze. The windshield was fogging over again, but this time not from his breath. Words were appearing on the glass, written from the outside, slow and deliberate. Turn around. He looked up, heart hammering, and saw his reflection in the rearview mirror, except it wasn't just his reflection. There was someone sitting in the back seat. Trevor screamed and threw the door open, stumbling out into the woods. He didn't stop running. The trees blurred together, branches tearing at his jacket. The fog was so thick now he could barely see his own hands. Somewhere behind him, the sound of footsteps followed, many of them matching his pace. He tripped and fell, rolling down a small embankment before landing hard on something flat. When he looked around, he realized he was standing on a road again, a paved one. His car was nowhere in sight. He staggered forward, legs trembling. The fog began to thin, and he saw headlights approaching in the distance. A truck. He waved his arms wildly, yelling for help. The truck slowed down, brakes squealing, and came to a stop beside him. The driver leaned out the window, a man in his 50s with a baseball cap and kind eyes. You all right, son? He asked. Trevor could barely speak. Please, there's something back there. People, they're dead, The driver frowned. Easy, easy. Where are you coming from? Hollow Creek, Trevor said, breathless. The man's expression changed. The warmth drained from his face. What did you just say? Trevor repeated it. The driver stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head. Son, Hollow Creek's been gone for over 30 years. Flood took it out in 92. Ain't nothing left there but swamp. Trevor's stomach dropped. No, that's not possible. I was just there. I saw the diner, the gas station. The man looked uneasy. You didn't see no one, did you? Trevor swallowed hard. I saw people. The driver's face went pale. You get in now. Trevor climbed into the truck, still shaking. The man floored it, and they drove in silence for several miles. The forest began to thin, the fog lifting slightly. Finally, Trevor asked, What happened there? The man didn't answer for a while. Then he said quietly, Bridge collapsed during a storm. Whole bus went into the creek. Families, kids, everyone. The town was already dying before that, but after, they just shut it down. Folks said the water never stopped whispering after that. Sheriff put up signs to keep people out, but... He glanced at Trevor. Some nights the fog gets thick and the roads twist. GPS goes crazy. Every few years, someone takes the wrong turn. Trevor sat in silence, staring out the window. His reflection in the glass looked strange, paler than it should be, eyes too dark. He blinked, and for a moment he thought he saw another face beside his own in the reflection, dripping wet, smiling faintly. He looked away quickly. They drove until they reached a highway, the fog finally dissipating. The driver dropped Trevor off at a small gas station with bright lights and living people. The clerk called a tow truck for him, and a few hours later, Trevor was sitting in a diner booth, wrapped in a blanket, still trembling. When the sheriff came to take his statement, Trevor told him everything. The wrong turn, the town, the people. The sheriff just listened, nodding slowly. When he was done, the sheriff said, You're not the first to say that. A few years back, a couple kids went missing same way, said they were heading for Charleston, ended up somewhere they shouldn't have, found their car by the creek, but not them. Trevor stared down at his coffee. It had gone cold. The sheriff sighed. You're lucky you got out. Trevor nodded numbly. He left town the next morning. He told himself it was just exhaustion, a hallucination brought on by stress and lack of sleep. He tried to believe it, but sometimes, late at night, when he drives through fog or crosses a bridge, his radio crackles to life for just a second, and a voice whispers, "Turn back." Story the end. It was supposed to be a simple drive home. Ethan Hall had been working a long shift at the lumber mill just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. The days were getting shorter, and by the time he clocked out, the sky was already sinking into that eerie violet that comes before night fully takes over. He'd stayed late to help a new hire close up, so he was one of the last cars leaving the lot. His coworkers were long gone, and the gravel lot was quiet, except for the hum of the fluorescent security lights and the crickets screaming in the woods beyond the fence. He got into his old silver Tacoma, tossed his lunchbox in the back seat, and checked his phone. No service. He sighed. The rural mountains had dead zones everywhere, but it didn't usually bother him. The GPS had already loaded his route home, a winding path through the Blue Ridge foothills, taking him through a stretch of back roads he'd driven a dozen times before. He pulled out, the headlights slicing through the mist that had begun to roll in. The night had that sharp, cold stillness particular to early fall, when summer's humidity was gone but winter hadn't yet arrived. The fog came creeping out from the forest like smoke, swirling in his beams and clinging to the ground. Ethan turned onto County Road 16, which cut through miles of empty forest. There were no houses, no gas stations, just dark woods pressing close on both sides. He rolled down his window to let in some fresh air, and the smell of wet leaves and pine filled the cab. For a while it was peaceful. He flicked on the radio, got only static, and turned it off again. He was about 30 minutes from home when he saw the orange detour sign. Road closed ahead. Use Alt route, it read, with an arrow pointing right. He frowned. That section of the road wasn't usually under construction, but it wasn't unusual either. The county was always patching potholes, fixing culverts, or dealing with storm damage. He didn't think much of it. He turned right at the next intersection onto a narrow asphalt road he didn't recognize. The GPS map blinked once, recalculating, but didn't seem to object. The voice guidance stayed silent, which he took as a good sign. The road was unmarked, snaking between dense trees. It looked like the kind of rural lane that might lead to a farm or an old property hidden in the hills. It was smooth at first, then gradually grew rougher, the pavement broken in places. Patches of fog drifted across it, thicker now. After about 15 minutes, he realized he hadn't seen another car since the detour. Not even headlights in the distance. He leaned closer to the windshield, squinting into the dark. The fog was swallowing everything beyond his beams. Then he noticed something strange. The trees. They were changing. On most mountain roads, the trees were thick but varied. Pine, oak, maple, mixed with gaps where you could sometimes catch glimpses of the slopes or the stars above. But here they were uniform, tall, gray trunks, bare of leaves, lined too evenly on both sides. Their branches reached over the road like claws, forming a kind of tunnel. The fog turned a pale yellow under his headlights. It looked unnatural, like smoke from an old fluorescent bulb. Ethan slowed the truck. The GPS screen froze, then flickered out completely. His phone lost its time display, replaced with a spinning circle where the signal bars used to be. He muttered under his breath, "Great." He told himself he'd keep driving another 10 minutes. The detour had to reconnect somewhere. All these back roads eventually led to Route 54, which would take him home. The silence grew heavier. The only sound was the hum of his tires over the broken asphalt. The woods outside seemed dead. No crickets now, no frogs, no rustling leaves, just stillness. Then he saw the first sign of life. A shape ahead. He slowed as his headlights revealed a parked car on the shoulder, a faded blue sedan, maybe a 90s model. Its driver's door was hanging open. He hesitated. The car looked abandoned. The interior was empty, but the headlights were off and there was no license plate. The paint was peeled and blotched, as if it had been sitting for years. But the open door, Ethan rolled past it slowly. Inside, the seats were torn, and something had clawed at the fabric, literally clawed, thin slashes across the upholstery. The windshield was cracked from the inside. He kept going. The fog grew denser, almost opaque. His headlights seemed to hit a wall of white. He leaned forward, gripping the wheel tighter. Then, in the beam of his right headlight, he saw movement. Something pale darted behind one of the trees. He hit the brakes, his heart jumping. He waited, staring into the woods. Nothing moved. Maybe it was an animal, he thought. A deer, a fox. He released the brake and kept going, slower now. But then came the sound, a faint scraping, like metal on asphalt. He turned the radio knob just to drown it out, but the radio hissed with sharp static. A whisper came through it, garbled but distinct. "Don't stop." He froze. He turned the knob again, but the static only grew louder. "Keep driving." Ethan's stomach dropped. He slammed the radio off. For a moment there was just his breathing. Then, another sound, a thud behind him. He glanced at the rearview mirror. The fog was so thick he couldn't see the road behind, just the faint outline of his own taillights glowing red. The sound came again, a slow, dragging thump, like something heavy sliding on the pavement. He pressed the gas, accelerating, his pulse thundering in his ears. The noise faded. He exhaled, trying to steady his breathing, but his headlights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Everything went black. "Come on," he muttered, tapping the light switch, flipping the brights on and off. The dashboard lights dimmed, then returned. The headlights sputtered back to life, but the road ahead looked wrong. It wasn't asphalt anymore. It looked like dirt. He slowed, peering out the window. The trees were closer now, their trunks streaked with deep grooves, as if something had clawed down them repeatedly. Some of them leaned inward, bending unnaturally, as if they were reaching toward the road. Ethan's phone screen lit up suddenly, even though he hadn't touched it. The lock screen glowed with a new time. 3:12 a.m. But he was sure it had only been about 40 minutes since he left work. He glanced at his watch. It had stopped completely. He swallowed hard and kept driving. The dirt road twisted downward into a shallow valley. He noticed faint shapes between the trees now, old, broken fences, the outline of a barn. Then a house appeared, sudden and silent in his headlights. It sat maybe 50 yards off the road, 2 stories tall but sagging in the middle. Its roof had partially collapsed and the windows were dark, except one upstairs, where a faint flickering light glowed. Ethan stopped the truck. He didn't want to go near it. Every instinct told him to keep driving, but the road ahead seemed to vanish into darkness, and the fog was too thick to see. Maybe someone in that house could tell him where he was. He pulled onto the shoulder, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped out. The air was colder than before, almost freezing. His breath came out in pale clouds. The ground under his boots was soft, like wet ash. He walked toward the house, flashlight beam cutting through the fog. The silence pressed in again, so complete it hurt his ears. Even his footsteps sounded muffled. As he got closer, he saw the mailbox, half buried in weeds. The paint had faded, but he could still make out the name, H.W. Mason. He didn't know anyone by that name. The front door hung open slightly, creaking with the wind. He shined the light inside. The hallway beyond was full of dust and collapsed furniture. Wallpaper peeled from the walls in long strips. The smell of mildew and rot filled the air. "Hello?" he called out. No response. He stepped inside. The floorboards groaned under his boots. The flashlight beam caught pictures hanging crookedly on the wall, black and white portraits of grim-faced people, all wearing old-fashioned clothes. Their eyes seemed to follow him. He moved toward the stairs. The faint light from the upstairs window still flickered. It wasn't electric. It looked like candlelight. "Anyone home?" He tried again. This time he heard something. A footstep from upstairs. Slow, deliberate. He froze, his breath shallow. The sound came again, closer to the top of the stairs. He said, voice shaking slightly, "I'm just lost. My GPS died. I just need directions." No answer. He took one step up. The wood groaned. Another footstep followed from above, matching his pace. He stopped. The silence stretched. Then tap, 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 like someone's fingernails brushing the banister. Ethan's pulse hammered. He lifted the flashlight higher, pointing it at the top of the stairs. There was no one there. But the candlelight flickered from the room at the end of the hall. He climbed the rest of the way up, every instinct screaming at him to leave. The upstairs hallway was lined with more pictures. One had fallen to the floor. He picked it up absently and froze when he saw it. It was a photograph of a man standing in front of this same house. The man was tall, wearing overalls, holding a hat in one hand. His eyes were wrong, too bright, even in the faded black and white image. He set it down and stepped toward the room with the light. The door was open. Inside was a small bedroom. The wallpaper was the same faded floral pattern, and a wooden crib sat near the far wall. In the crib was an old candle, flickering weakly. Melted wax had pooled around a small pile of bones. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He took a step back, then heard it. A baby crying. It came from behind him. He turned, shining the light down the hall. Nothing. The crying grew louder, echoing off the walls, impossible to locate. He ran. Down the stairs, through the hall, back out into the cold night air. The crying stopped the instant he stepped outside. He sprinted to his truck, jumped in, and slammed the door. The headlights came on again automatically, but the road looked different now. It stretched straight ahead, no longer dirt, but not the same pavement either. It was blacker, slicker, almost wet-looking. He didn't care. He floored the gas. The truck roared forward, tires spitting gravel. For a few minutes, all he could hear was the engine. Then, voices. Faint. Whispering. He turned off the radio again, but the whispers didn't stop. They were coming from inside the truck. "Shouldn't have stopped," one murmured. "Not your road," another hissed. Ethan shouted, "Shut up!" The voices fell silent. Then something moved in the passenger seat. He looked and saw the outline of a person sitting there. A man. Pale skin, hollow eyes, dirt smeared across his face. His mouth hung open, and from it came a slow, rattling breath. Ethan slammed the brakes, screaming. The figure vanished. The truck stalled in the middle of the road. He sat there, panting, trying to start the engine again. It cranked, sputtered, then caught. The road was empty. The fog had thinned a little, revealing shapes ahead, telephone poles, a rusty road sign. He leaned closer, reading it. County Road 16. He was back on his original route. He let out a shaky laugh, almost a sob. He drove the rest of the way home in silence. When he pulled into his driveway, dawn was breaking. His hands were trembling so hard he could barely turn off the ignition. He sat there for a long time, staring at the trees beyond his house. When he finally went inside, his wife, Amanda, looked up from the kitchen, startled. "Ethan, it's almost 7. Where were you? You didn't answer your phone all night." He tried words wouldn't come out right. He told her about the detour, the fog, the house, but as he spoke, the details started slipping away. She frowned. "What house?" He blinked. He couldn't remember exactly where it was now, or what the name on the mailbox said. He went to check his phone. It showed no missed calls, no messages, and the time said 11:23 p.m. He stared at it, feeling his skin crawl. He swore it had been dawn outside when he came home. He went back to the window. It was pitch dark again. Outside, in the distance, through the trees, he thought he saw a faint flicker of candlelight. Story the end.